Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Cucchiara, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome in, Joe Cucchiara here with Real Estate Radio Live. Merry Christmas to those that we are recording this show a couple of days after Christmas. I hope everybody had a nice, relaxing, enjoyable Christmas. And I'm sure for most of us, speaking for myself, it was a little more intimate and a little more low-key. But nonetheless, I hope everybody's healthy and doing well. I want to thank everyone for continuing to follow the podcast. What we normally do now, because of the we don't have a studio anymore, we record these and then we launch them, of course, on all the social media vehicles. But then we also put it on Facebook, the recorded part of it, or the audio here, to give you a snapshot to just let everybody know still that Jack Russo is a real man operating in a real place in Florida. So always good to have him back. Today we're going to talk about the exodus of California, which is really becoming not only reality, but a wake-up call. It's good to have you back, Jack.
Well, thanks, Joe, and you look great. I just took out of a box a brand new MacBook Pro, which has this great high-powered camera and a great display, this enhanced Retina display. And man, you look like you're right there. I have to say, Apple really has perfected technology. And I will say, I mentioned Apple at the start because, boy, if Apple announces that they're moving to Texas or Nevada or somewhere, man, we are really going to see government shaking their boots. Maybe they don't care as much about HP and Oracle because they're sort of old Silicon Valley. HP was really one of the earliest. And Oracle was pretty early too. We started Oracle at my previous law firm, Davis, Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick. I remember going to deal closing meetings with Larry Ellison where he was kind of like a salesman. Mm-hmm. And he probably doesn't remember me because I was just a young lawyer, but he was very much about just get the deal done. It's got to be booked. It's got to be booked before the end of the year. And he was very much a numbers guy and probably still is. And I imagine that the decision to move was just overwhelmingly supported by data that they would end up doing far better from a tax point of view.
Right.
Maybe their C-suite executives would as well. Of course, real estate's about 1/10 the price in Texas for what it is in California. Some listeners may correct me, but it's pretty cheap, relatively speaking.
And you have, just to name the big ones we've talked about recently, you have Oracle now, you have HP, Tesla, of course, looks like they're going to do it. There's several others, some financial institutions. I know that there's, my guess is kind of the market doesn't want to spook people and, the economy is kind of rolling along, which is amazing to me in this pandemic. But don't you believe at one point, you can't tell me that the exodus of these three big companies, plus the fact that more people will be permanently working from home, that this cannot have an impact on commercial real estate. It's hard for me to believe. I'm not going to suggest it will collapse, but don't you think, let's specifically kind of target Silicon Valley for the moment, it has to have some kind of impact, doesn't it?
Right. I mean, I think what you see is that the Class C buildings or the Class B buildings will get less demand for sure, and the pricing of the Class A buildings will drop. People typically at the lowest price. Class A buildings, I mean, the way commercial is divided is like, 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, but they use A, B, and C. And generally speaking, Class A buildings have to have certain amenities and, certain aspects where you really feel that you're in a beautiful palace.
Right.
And there are a class of buildings that make you feel that way. There's no question. And those buildings probably will see price come down. I don't know how far, but it will come down. And probably what they're counting on is that people will take more space for fewer people on some view that everyone needs to be, in a bubble. So if you have an office that or cubicle that was typically, 50 square feet, maybe like 7 by 7 cubicle, 49 square feet, they might double it and say, let's give someone 100 square feet, or let's give them 150 square feet. And so I think the commercial real estate people are hoping that businesses will be very robust and generous with their square footage. But I don't think businesses really operate that way. I think they think to themselves, we're going to put up plastic, plexiglass, like if you go in, I went into the AAA, the American Automobile Association offices in California last time I was there, which was a couple of weeks ago for a trial that didn't happen. We can talk about that another time. But the plexiglass was all over the place. Yeah. So there were still as many people behind the counter, but essentially no free coffee, no free tea, none of the amenities. They don't want you hanging out, so they won't give you a Wi-Fi passcode. They shut that down. They want you in and out. And it's all plexiglass, sort of like you're not really interacting with their people. You can see them, you can talk to them, but you've got glass in between the cubicles.
So maybe Gavin Newsom's next big idea. First, they've been filling up hotel rooms with the homeless. Maybe his next idea is to fill up the commercial space with homeless.
Well, it's not an easy time to be in government. I wouldn't want to be a mayor or governor of a city or a state or a county supervisor. I think it's I think right now we're going through in a very adaptive way, because Silicon Valley did adapt very quickly to the Zoom approach. Mm-hmm. And deals are still getting done. Companies are still being formed. They're getting financed, bootstrapped. Maybe slower, but people are meeting and some trust is developing over a Zoom or a WebEx in a way that I think most people would have been surprised a few years ago, would have said, oh, the economy will collapse. It has not collapsed. We still pay our bills online, more or less. We still get paid online, more or less. The court system is still working, more or less. Government's sort of working, although subject to a lot of criticism, because it's not obvious what buttons you press if people start leaving. And when they leave, they take all their tax dollars with them. So the effect of Oracle leaving is not just all of that tax money from Oracle. It's all the real estate taxes from the Oracle employees, the sales taxes, the business taxes. You go down a list, it's a lot of taxes, all just saying, hey, I've had it. And, we had Steve King on from I want to say 6+ months ago, where he said, adios, I'm going to Arizona, which was not a no tax state. It's a low tax state. And he said, I'm happy to pay taxes, but the roads have to have no potholes. And he said, that's the case in Arizona. So I think California is going to get kicked around a little bit here, but I don't know what the governor does. I think he has ambitions for the White House, so maybe he doesn't really see it as much of a challenge. He just has to get through it. But it seems like you have to do some really smart things. I'm going to bite my tongue, and I'm going to say it when I bite my tongue, but how do you feel about being a billionaire and giving a few $1 billion of tax money to the state of California? How would you feel about that if you were a billionaire? You're a billionaire. If you're 100 billionaire, as some people are in California, so maybe you give 10 or so to state of California?
Well, I would say this. I can't speak for the billionaires because I'm not in that.
You're not there yet.
I'm not in that rarefied air. But I would say these are typically some really, really smart people. And what I mean by this is, I don't think in many cases they mind giving up the money or donating or doing things, but they want to be able to see some kind of results, or what is this going to actually do to improve when I pony up this $1 billion. And it would seem like right now California is just like, I don't know, it's just I don't know what you want to call it, a crater, an empty hole. It seems like it never ends. I'm not sure if they have a good reputation of managing the money and the funds. That's the problem.
Well, I think if you're someone like, Zuckerberg, and more or less your whole main operation is in
That's true.
California.
Yeah.
And you own like 10 or more properties in California, most of which are in downtown Palo Alto.
Yeah.
Maybe it's okay to sort of say, great, tax me at a high rate. I'm okay with that. I make enough money to subsidize the rest of the Californians, which of course it's a growing number of that. I think to the extent you have people leaving, there's a growing number of people who are of lower income coming in. We're attracting almost in sort of a oddball way, like sort of as a magnet, people that can't really support themselves. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah.
People who really can't support them. I mean, I'll give you an example of this. In most other states, before you can get Medicaid, which is full medical service without paying a dime, if you've decided to give away your money, you have to wait 5 years. In California, you can give your money away and wait just 2.5 years and then get Medicaid rights. That's sort of like attracting people who are taking advantage of what might be called the socialism of California. And that's not the same in other states. So it's interesting to think about because the Medicaid, Medicare system is going to have a lot of pressure on it, including pressure within the individual states.
Well, that's a good point.
We're all getting older.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting to me, and I'll give you my opinion, I want to get yours too, Jack, is so I think we both would agree that it's probably going to have some impact on the commercial real estate. To what extent, we don't know, but I would believe if anybody was studying right now, it's going to have some impact. What's interesting is, for the most part, residential real estate has been unfazed. Now, I'm going to break that down. I'm going to compartmentalize a little bit, though, because I'm in it every day. So what I see is single family, rural, residential neighborhoods, sought out places near towns, things like that are really, really, going like crazy and has no negative effect at all. Where I'm seeing a bit of a negative effect with residential is highly populated downtown areas like San Francisco, New York, places like that. And then what's interesting too is the condominium market has slowed substantially as well. That tells me, there's people rushing to buy, but there's more of a demand for the kind of the single family with a little bit of space on your hand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I would say most young families that are going out to buy are thinking we don't want to be in an elevator with somebody else. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be in a building where there's too much density. We don't want to suffer from some contagion. So if you give someone their own backyard and their own fence, they're like, if we have to shelter in place, let's shelter in place in style. And that sort of argues for single family as opposed to condominium. I think there are people in condominiums that see situations where their monthly maintenance fees are going up as more and more things are done to sort of, create hygiene, whatever that is, more spraying, more this, more that. That costs money to do. And if people are doing it and they're doing it more often and they're getting their driveways sprayed down, their garage doors sprayed down and everything else, there's going to be a bigger maintenance bill. And that bigger maintenance bill is, it's not a do-it-yourself bill because the condo association is going to hire outside professionals. You can't do it yourself. They're going to say, no, this is handled by the association. So for a lot of people, condominiums often become, hey, this is more expensive than if I just handle my own backyard and I handle my own hygiene. And so, it does divide the world. I think as people get older, they typically want those things done for them. They don't want to do them. But a young couple, a young family that are saving money and trying to save money, they'll probably gravitate more towards single family most of the time.
I know we focus mostly on Silicon Valley because that's where you and I are very familiar and where we operate from for the most part. But I'm also hearing that there's a lot of rumors of some mass exodus from New York to, say, Florida and other places for a lot of the financial firms. Are you hearing some of the same?
Right. New York has been one of the worst in terms of taxes for a long time because New York has a city tax, a county tax, a state tax, and of course you got federal tax, and it's got one of the highest sales tax rates on top of it. And we all know to cab or even an Uber in New York City is not cheap to get around. And most people don't really use the subway because they worry more about their safety. Now they probably worry more about their health.
Right.
So, you know, it's one of these situations where New York has gotten a lot more expensive. People don't really want to do business there anymore because they don't see the value of being in this high-rise building where you have to fight to get on an elevator and only 2 people can go on an elevator.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to see a number of big firms. I think that one of the big firms, I want to say one of the biggest firms announced that they're moving part of the firm to Florida.
Yeah, I can't remember, but it was a big name financial institution, I believe.
Right. I want to say it'll come to me in a minute, but it was kind of an announcement, and I think by and large, it's a statement that the great cities of America are going to empty out for a while. I think you're not going to see the high-rise buildings go up as fast. You're not going to see the tenancy rates. I think we're going to see a sort of emptying out, and you're going to see much more of what might be called the suburbs near major, within 50 miles, say, or 100 miles of major airports. Mm-hmm. So if you drew a circle around like Tampa International Airport or Orlando or even Miami Beach, and you said, well, what are these little towns, or Portland, Oregon, or, you know, Seattle, Washington? There's a lot of little towns that can support even big businesses. And I think that's going to happen. I think you're going to see a complete, years ago, we used to call this the greening of America, where the thought was the cities would eventually sort of disappear. That didn't play out. The cities actually continue to become more dense. Yeah. But I think the wake-up call right now is the cities cannot serve the purpose of moving things even faster, causing decisions to happen faster. Right. Decisions are happening faster right here on Zoom. Mm-hmm. That could be anywhere. So why wouldn't it be in a lower tax place or a place that has better weather? New York City doesn't have great weather. The transportation crawls in the midst of a snowstorm. Yeah. I mean, you know, think about it. They get snow in New York City, everything sort of grinds to a halt for a while.
You know, the other thing I wanted to ask you, Jack, obviously, is the legal expert here as well, is that one of the things that I'm hearing a lot about, you know, there was a lot of talk in the most recent relief bill where that one of the sticking points was the companies didn't want the liability, right? If someone were to come back to work and get sick or sue the company. And so I guess my question to you, don't you think, not only on top of more people working home and remotely, but don't you think companies now in the back of their planning stages and their boardrooms are thinking about, well, not only do we need this space, but what kind of liability does it open us up for the more people we have in these isolated areas? Does that make sense? Do you think there's some thought around that now too?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people that have so many different views on this topic of what is the right way to use all the geography in the United States. Like right now, if you look at the population spread, it's like East Coast and West Coast has, in various cities along the East Coast and various cities along the West Coast, so much of the population. And then the middle of the country is just open. Now it's a lot of farmland, a lot of ranch land. It's not like you can convert it that easily, but there's people like Tesla who go out to a suburb of Reno, Nevada, and buy up, 5,000 acres or whatever number of acres they buy up, and they decide to build a plant, and they get that done, and all of a sudden there's another city near Reno that pops up that's sort of a suburb of Reno, and Reno's the main city, but fundamentally it becomes like this is going to be Tesla Town. And it doesn't call itself Tesla Town, but it's a little bit like years ago, these company towns, they came into existence. So Tesla is going to bring with it that battery factory that they're building out in the desert of Reno, or outside Reno. They're going to bring with it like 10x the number of jobs behind whatever number of people end up working in that factory. There'll be restaurant workers, there'll be maids, there'll be housekeepers, there'll be, all sorts of people that are supporting those individuals that work there, because those are going to be pretty well paid individuals.
Right.
So you could expect the real estate in that area will eventually go up, and with it will become other people that are in Silicon Valley saying, hey, so-and-so is now working for Tesla, used to work in Fremont, now is working in Reno, and Fremont looks like it might be closing because he might just say, you know what, I'm fed up. He's had run-ins with the sheriff in the East Bay, and I don't think he's the kind of guy that forgets that someone's trying to shut down his factory as he's trying to make his numbers. So it wouldn't surprise me that he decides to move either to Reno or Austin or both.
Yeah.
And it looks to me like his bias is against California, but he becomes a thought leader for every other CEO. Well, if he doesn't think it's good here, then why should I think it's good here? And that's a bad sort of beginning of a herd mentality, right?
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, but along the same lines, I thought it was interesting. I don't know if you heard about it in before, but I haven't heard. So now Apple announced that they're getting into the autonomous car, right? Self-driving cars. What do you suppose their move there is? Because it doesn't seem like, maybe it does seem like a likely move, but you have a company that is dominating the phone market, obviously the music market, so on and so forth. What would their strategy of now wanting to invest get into the self-driving cars?
So I think when you think of Apple, you have to think of like three things. Number one, they've got so much cash that's sitting on the books. I don't know where it's sitting. It used to be offshore. Maybe it's offshore. Maybe it's here. But there's so much cash that when you sit down as executives or as the board, you have to ask yourself, what's a big enough industry for us to really deploy monstrous amounts of investment to really move the needle, right? So there aren't a lot of industries. Like if you look at it, I don't think they're going to go into housing. People have said at some level, well, what if there was like an Apple home? What would that look like? Because they did signal at one point they might get into healthcare, but they got into it in a very sort of tepid way, which is let's make the watch be more about health. The latest version 6 or 5 or whichever the latest version is, that's the highest price one that has, all sorts of dials in it that look at your heartbeat and everything else that goes with it. But when you pick an industry, so you say the car industry, and you say, well, what if we can imagine a car that really is meant for what might be called local autonomous transportation, but with kind of a bunch of screens? Then it's more like a computer than a car. So if you say to yourself, what does it really mean to be mobile computing? And you say, well, the car itself is like 4 wheels and a computer system. It's got a motor and a battery, and battery technology ends up being pretty important in the story because Apple's very interested in improving battery technology for everything else it does. So you start to say to yourself, it is plausible that they could say, look, we're going to start with something very simple that just moves people around, say, a 50-mile radius. And you might say it can move people from Palo Alto to Stanford, and from Stanford to San Jose, just very basic, not something where you're going to go on the interstate freeway for the next 12 hours. And you know what? There's a market for that. There's a market for getting some sort of autonomous movement of people, almost like from Las Vegas airport to the hotels. You know how many cabs do that now? You could argue that they're kind of a waste of time and money. Most of those cabs are idling most of the time. But imagine that you replace them with Apple Pods, where you get in the Apple Pod and it takes you to your hotel in a smart way. I can imagine that. And I think people are imagining that. They're imagining that Apple is going to take a shot at coming up with something that's more of a computer than it is a car, and more of a set of screens, and almost like a people mover. Now, I have no inside information, but the way I put this together is, what do you do with all that cash if you're not taking some risk? Where do you go with it? Now, you could do little incremental acquisitions, like they bought the Beats company, not really for the earphones, probably more for the music library. You know, maybe they could buy other music. Maybe they could buy Dylan, I guess, just sold his entire library for $300 million. I read something in the newspaper that said Bob Dylan got a small fortune for his set of songs. But I mean, those are incremental, small things. They don't really move the needle in a big way.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah, it's similar to what I think Amazon is the one that got into maybe healthcare or maybe pharmacy or something, if I recall. They're moving in that similar direction. So you think part of it is just they have so much cash, and what kind of industries can they really affect? And let's face it,
when they go out to outside consultants and say, you know, whatever number they have, let's call it, you know, at least 500 million. I think it's more like a few billion.
Probably.
Because they're headed to $1 trillion. I think they're over $1 trillion.
I think Apple is now, yeah.
Let's just look it up just so we have it down. But I think a lot of it is cash. A lot of that valuation, as it turns out, is cash. Or if you look at the company, the market valuation at 136, and it's probably undervalued, the stock keeps going up, is 2.3 trillion.
Wow.
I think it must have at least 500 billion with the B, and maybe closer to $1 trillion of cash. What do you do with that kind of cash? Now, I'll tell you what I would do. Before I would start an actual car company, I would buy Ford. You know what Ford's valuation is? Now, it would change dramatically. And I'm sure people like Ford would never sell because Ford family would never sell. But Ford right now has a market cap of 35 billion. Apple could offer 50 billion for Ford, get Ford with all of its distribution, all of its
structure, everything.
And they could open Apple stores inside the dealerships. Inside the dealership could be an Apple store. So you now have expanded the Apple name to like so many other places around the world, right? You're buying distribution. Yeah. And then you say, well, the Apple Ford is coming. You know, you make that announcement. So I don't think Ford is necessarily on the market. I don't think the Ford family is ready to sell, but 50 billion, which is already a 50% enhancement over market price of Ford. Mm-hmm. And think about how many mistakes get solved by not making them, because Ford has had the last 200 years to make those mistakes.
Right.
So hopefully you keep enough talent within Ford to run the Apple motor division that's called Ford Apple or Apple Ford or whatever they name it. You know, Apple maybe be called Ford Macintosh or Ford something.
Yeah.
But you come up with a name, you come up with a great name, and people are like, that's the company in the future. Now, Ford just came out with an electric Mustang, with an electric version of Mustang that playing all the ads for it like it's the greatest car that's ever lived. I don't know if it is or it isn't, but I have to say that if you need four wheels and a motor, Ford definitely has been around long enough to supply it. Yeah. I mean, literally it would cost them a fraction, a tiny drop in the bucket of their cash,
right,
to buy Ford. And that's buying, by the way, that's buying the whole company. They could buy 51% and move in that direction.
We got just a couple minutes left. One of the other things I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about is the vaccine. Now, I guess, you know, there's a lot of promising news, and the effective, I think it's 95%. So some early signs are good. I think we have over 1 million people vaccinated with a target. I don't know if they'll hit their 20 million by the end of the year, but do you think that there's been a little bit of a sigh of relief in the business communities and real estate, commercial real estate, with the idea that, let's call it summertime, things might be back to not 100% normal, but you think that'll change some of the thinking of these companies exiting, or will they still continue to pursue those opportunities and not really care about what the vaccine's what kind of effect that's gonna have?
I think the big learning from this last 9+ months is that business can operate without having as many meetings. And I think we're going to see more and more businesses say, we meet maybe once a month. You know, what used to be once a week or twice a week or 3 times a week, we meet in person once a month. The rest of the time, there's smaller meetings by Zoom, but the work gets done without this high intensity daily kind of go over it again and again kind of meeting. I think that that's going to result in people putting on a different slant on what's important in terms of office space, office location, office anything. And you're going to see these low tax states like Florida, Texas, Tennessee, Nevada. You're going to see them, you know, state of Washington even, you're going to see them start to pull in bigger businesses.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you do. I don't know really what you say in California, other than we've got great universities here like Stanford and Berkeley and Santa Clara and all these great universities, and even San Jose State University is a great university. But I don't know that that's enough to convince businesses that they should be near where the graduates are. The graduates will get on planes and will relocate. They want jobs.
Do you think do you think the luster of along those lines, what you're suggesting, that the thought about I need to have my company here because Sandhill Capital and venture capital's next door, you think that whole thing has changed too?
I don't think anything. I think the venture capitalists will have to adapt. Maybe they'll stay on Sandhill Road, but I think they'll have to travel. I think that the power has been moving away from cash capital for quite a while. The power has been gravitating more towards intellectual capital, intellectual property. Essentially, the value is more in the idea than it is in the money. Yes, you need the money often to expand, but usually the money can be had any number of ways. You know, usually there's lots of sources for money. If the idea is good, the team is good, the market has been proven out, the use cases have been proven, there's enough reference, you know, customers or potential customers saying, yes, I'll buy it once you really build it or once you really get it done. You know, there's a lot of steps, as you know, to get to that point of validation. Once you get to that point of validation, the cash is usually available from a million different places, and Sandhill Road, to my way of thinking, doesn't offer more than cash.
The other thing I thought would be fun, let's throw it out right before we leave too. I was thinking about this, you know, with the pandemic and stay-at-home orders and all that. I have to admit myself, you know, funny, a year or so ago, I used to hear about binging and Netflix, and I mean, I have to be honest, I did not even have a subscription to Netflix until January, February of this year. And man, I'm one of those guys that's kind of hooked now. So I think you're the one that recommended Billions. Did you recommend that to me? I wasn't sure if you or someone else did. I don't know if maybe there was another kind of a Wall Street.
No, I recommend it. Yeah, I recommend it to you. I recommend it to you. Yeah.
So I'm in, I think season 2 or 3 of that, and that's very, very good. And the other one's kind of interesting that people should watch just to think they go, oh my God, this is very familiar right now, and that is Designated Survivor. Only because of the political back and forth that goes on with they have some, you know, some potential pandemics and other things. It's kind of interesting. But what are your recent favorites?
Well, I've been watching the one about the woman chess player.
Oh, that was good. I saw that one. Yeah.
Queen's
Gambit?
Queen's Gambit, right.
Yeah.
And by the way, you mentioning Billions made me think of Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs in New York is moving part of their operation to Florida.
Goldman Sachs. Yeah, that's
and
right.
that's a really big statement, because Goldman Sachs has been very much about New York City and very much about grabbing talent from universities like Harvard, Columbia, Yale, that are within a train ride to New York City. Yeah. And they've been grabbing talent for many, many years. So to signal that the talent has to go to Florida, it's not the end of the world, but it is kind of a bit of a shift.
Yeah.
saying, look, New York is not what it used to be. And we think there are better places to plant our talent and where our talent can do quite well. So it's quite a statement to see that happen.
The last one I'll say, and you'll appreciate it. I don't know if you've seen it. Fairly new, and now the new episodes come out every Sunday, and that's called Your Honor. It's a legal show with Bryan Cranston, the same guy that did Breaking Bad, and
I've seen the ads for it. I haven't watched it. Is it good?
So you'll like that. So he's a judge. His son gets into trouble, and you'll like it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that the other thing that's happened for Netflix and these other media companies is a recognition that people don't have to go to movie theaters
to
really continue the buzz of talking about a movie. Often people thought, well, you have to get enough people together to watch the film together to create buzz, because then they talk about it and it's a joint experience. Now, I don't think movie theaters are going away, but I bet they're going to shrink for a while.
Yeah.
And the spacing is going to get a lot larger. It's been getting that way for a while, where the seats are getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you're going to have your own separate little cubicle for watching a film. But boy, if someone starts sneezing in that theater, it's going to be like yelling fire in a theater. People are going to be exiting to the doors because they're going to worry that, hey, I came here for the movie and I walked out with COVID. I don't want to be holed up for 3 weeks. But I will end with this remark, which really surprised me. I talked to a registered nurse the other day. I forget the context. She might have been visiting my mom here because she actually gets, as part of her Medicare package, to try to keep her out of the hospital, they send nurses to her. And the nurses do like the full workup, blood pressure, the whole 9 yards. And I said to this nurse, she had a mask on, I had a mask on, we're 6 feet apart. She's in my mom's room. I'm out in the hallway and I'm sort of screaming at her. I said to her, so what do you think? What do you think is going to happen with this COVID stuff? And she said, I just think everyone's going to get it. And if you're really strong, this is her view, if you're really strong, you'll be resilient to it and you'll get the antibody production to generate faster and faster. And it'll be like you dodge the flu season. There are people that dodge the flu season. I'm not one of them. Usually I'll get sick for a week or so and I'll be miserable. But, if you can imagine dodging the full flu season in smart ways, wash your hands, don't get in front of somebody who's sneezing, get a lot of exercise, get fresh air, the whole list of things, take your vitamins, eat well, blah, 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 do all that smart stuff, right? And then you dodge the flu season and then your antibodies are higher as a result of you dodge the season, and you start to get this beginning of a stronger race.
Interesting.
A stronger race is emerging. And her point is survival of the fittest. I mean, she was about a 30-year veteran as a nurse. She said, I expect to get it. I'm taking all the precautions, but I see too many people. I see too many people that probably have it. She sees a lot of old people. She have COVID. They're probably going to die. They're probably going to die faster. So her view is she's going to get it, but she's hoping that she'll be resilient. And her view is that's the real message that Fauci and others should be saying, which is, look, lift your weights, get on the treadmill, be smart about your sleep, don't lower your metabolism, keep your metabolism going. And I think if we had that message out there, we would be saying to people, get fit. And that would be the right message right now. This message of just hole up and watch movies all day long. I know you lift weights. I know you're fit. But this Netflix message of binge watch while you're eating popcorn, that's the wrong message. That's really the wrong message.
Yeah, it is. Well, before we duck out real quick, remind everybody where they can reach you if they need some legal support or legal help.
Probably the best way is by email initially, because we still have to make sure that we don't have any conflicts of interest, but usually we don't because we're a small firm. So that's J Russo, JRUSSO @computerlaw, one word, computer, LAW.com. We do answer the phone. It does get answered. We do still have a receptionist at 650-327-9800. We do meet people, although the meetings are by Zoom, usually. And we do talk to them daily, and we spend a lot of time talking to new clients, and a lot of people are very gritty. A lot of people are using grit to sort of grow their business in the face of adversity. You got to give people credit. They're out there making things happen in adversity in ways that are surprising. So I think that there will be a number of startups that come out of this COVID-19 era that will be far stronger than ones that would have emerged without, like, could have emerged or maybe couldn't have emerged without COVID-19. Because the real entrepreneurs are like stepping up and taking the challenge. Now, whether or not we see as much happen in the IPO markets and M&A and that sort of thing, money is still relatively cheap. I mean, surprisingly cheap if you look at it. And there are a lot of people that are going to try to take advantage of it.
All right, Jack, we'll catch up with you next week.
Thanks, Joe. You look great. Have a happy new year. Take care, you and your family. Talk to you later.
We hope to see you next month on your visit out here.
I will. I'll make sure to contact you. We'll have lunch, and I have a bottle of wine for you as a gift as well.
All right. Take care of yourself, Jack.
Later. Bye-bye.
Cucchiara's Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you again for tuning in this afternoon. For more information, you can go to RERL-live.com.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.